Today I'm going to talk about customer experience. A number of the speakers this morning have mentioned experience, and it's something that we believe that hasn't really been understood and investigated in the way that the advertising communications industry has. So today I'm going to share you some observations and research that we've conducted in trying to codify and understand how experiences work. This is an increasingly important battleground for brands today. Again, as many speakers have said, Gartner say that 89% of companies compete primarily on the basis of customer experience, which has kind of tripled since 2010. Bain believe that 80% of companies believe they're delivering a superior experience, but only 8% of their customers actually agree with those people. And 75% of companies surveyed in 2016 said the top objective was to improve the customer experience. So I'm not making it up, this is important. This is surveyed as being quite an important topic across businesses. There are a number of quotes that we could have used, but this one, which is kind of similar to Adam Morgan's Uber's children topic, is the fact that there aren't really measures or comparisons with traditional competitors. When you think about experiences, the benchmark is set by the best experience we have in our lives, not by bank versus bank or retailer versus retailer. Everyone expects your favorite brands to be able to do the things that Uber and Airbnb can do with their experiences. So it's kind of borderless in that way. But oftentimes you see that there's no real clear understanding of how and when what payback is going to occur from investing in CX. The reasons to launch a new mobile app or redesign the website or change a customer service center are not often driven by campaign metrics that we often see. And so very few people set out with this chart in their head when they convene a project to invest in customer experience. And also a lot of investment in customer experience comes from the CapEx, from the capital expenditure of a business, not the OpEx. So the payback period is not quite the same, or the clarity of payback isn't the same as what you expect from short-term investments in OpEx. CX is challenging to measure. I'm sure in client organizations, differently, you may have chief digital officer, chief client officer, chief experience officer, in addition to the chief marketing officer. In a bank, for example, you often find that marketing run communications, digital run front-end design of websites, and some weird IT security team run the logged-in state that no one's allowed to touch for hell or high waters. So how do you convey a integrated experience where different teams are responsible for different things? In fact, one of our clients who manages the customer, no names, no pack drill on who the client is, but the mobile app that we built for them, their target was 1 million customers using the mobile app. The person that owns that KPI is an IT person, where you think the adoption of a really important touch point should belong to marketing, but it doesn't. So there's a lot of issues around measuring CX because it's diffuse and owned by different parts of the organization. And also, therefore, the knowledge of what works in those parts of the experience is siloed and not normally shared across a business. Also, when you look at measuring customer experience, tends to be okay at a functional level. So, things like usability, everyone measures usability. Sadly, most of the time that usability insight comes from 10 bearded hipsters in Shoreditch who are dragged off the street into a design agency to ask their opinions about a product they know nothing about, normally mortgages or something, or pension funds. And also as well, as a kind of a bad form of a catch-all, NPS is like the last bastion of a rogue. It's the thing that if something's too difficult to measure, then NPS is wheeled out because it's easy to understand. We can pay bonuses off the back of it, and it's very easy to measure. But it's a heuristic. It's a rule of thumb that spans a gap, a chasm of kind of knowledge. CX is also measured from a customer and a CRM perspective. But the bits that very few companies are really good at is understanding what's the brand impact of CX. And what's ultimately the business impact that the brand impact is causing. A bit like the false dichotomy between short and long-term measurement, CX can be measured in the short term, but very few people have ever invested in understanding what the brand impact of CX is. And as an example of that, if you ever see a CX company, they generally wheel out some version of this chart, which kind of says that stock market leaders have better customer experience and and laggards have really poor stock market performance. But this is really correlation and not causation. And lots of things are attributed to companies that are doing well, and CX is one of those things. So, this is a good example of we don't have good knowledge in the moment that people still roll out this kind of Forrester watermark chart. And also in the industry of CX, there are no Binet and Field. There isn't 50 years of IPA effectiveness awards for CX. It's good that the IPA is looking at customer experience as a big part of the awards going forward, but it's not enough. And it's kind of the darkness of the last 50 years. There is no kind of commercially available, any educational information around measuring CX. And that's what we want to run to shine a light into and understand more from this perspective. The reason why it's important, and we started our research in financial services, but the reason we think it's important is from our data amongst our financial services businesses, clients, they spend 5 times more on the customer experience than they do on marketing communications. So all the information we saw earlier on about the different breakdowns and channels, it's a small budget compared to how service brands, at least, maybe not CPG brands, but service brands spend far more on customer experience. And that has a huge impact on the brand overall, and yet isn't owned by the CMO often. So that's quite a sobering statistic. The aims of our research were really to measure the business and the brand impact of CX, the red bits that we couldn't see before, and understand how CX creates consumer and brand value, and getting closer to understand the concept of payback when you're investing in CX. The approach, we did the approach in partnership with the Effectiveness Partnership, and we did some research. We first of all did some groups to understand and validate the hypothesis we had about what drives value. We then quantified the findings with surveys asking people about their usage behaviors online, and we focused on the UK personal banking sector to begin with. A number of caveats is obviously one sector in one country. Doesn't mean it's going to normalize across all sectors and all countries. And also it was a moment in time, and time changes. So hopefully we'll expand the research going forward to get a better grip. But I welcome anyone kind of look at the research into this whole field. In the course of the research, we developed 3 key metrics that we think are important to measuring and driving growth through investments in CX. First is a concept of RepStock. If you're familiar with ad stock, a similar metric where we asked people about how memorable an experience was. If anyone's read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, there's a whole chapter on building memorable experience, not just utilitarian experiences, because it's the memories of the experience that drive us back the next time. If you want to drive future purchase behavior, then you have to build memory. Everyone focuses on usability, clean sites with big login buttons. That doesn't help to create a future memorable experience. The second thing is the quality and utility of the experience. At the end of the day, people come to an experience to complete a task, to get a job done. No matter how cool things look, if you can't do the task you wanted to in a speedy time, then you're just letting people down. And the third thing is how often do people use the experience? How often do they keep coming back to it? That's RepStock. And we divide it between digital and non-digital touch points. The second thing is RepStock, which is really your reputation. How much is a brand talked about? What's the sentiment of the conversation around the brand? And how does that affect your behavior? And the third thing we looked at was growth. So the ability to attract new customers, how are people spending more time with a brand, and how do we adjust for customers using the brand less in the future? So those are the 3 kind of metrics. And obviously in our research finding, we're kind of in a post-digital world, we'd say now. Most people have normalized their digital behavior across all channels, and they spend a lot of their time on digital channels, particularly in banking, where mobile banking is far surpassed kind of web banking in terms of the frequency and penetration of usage. And the digital touch points are the drivers of the overall experience because so much of our time in CX is spent in digital channels. And the digital disruptors have a higher experience stock than legacy brands. And I'm going to show you some information about that. And as a consequence, are growing faster. So the emerging success model is you need to drive X stock, which drives reputation stock, which equals growth. And I'll give you the examples of this. So what we found is there's no relationship between RepStock and growth. The overall reputation doesn't mean a high, strong reputation doesn't mean strong growth. A lot of legacy brands have good reputations, but it doesn't mean to say they're going to grow in the future. But Digital X-Stock has a strong relationship with growth. If you have a strong X-Stock, it predicts that you're going to have a strong growth in the future and a much stronger relationship here. And this is not just true for Monzo, which is clearly the poster boy for fintech startups, but also of the more legacy businesses, Barclays, which was talked about earlier. They're seeing a lot of growth at the moment with quite a strong X-Stock score as well. Non-digital touchpoints, X-Stock, again, doesn't drive growth at all. It's the digital experience, not the physical experience. And you think about how many branch closures are going on everywhere. It's harder and harder to have a physical experience with your bank anymore, unless it's kind of an emergency, you're forced to do it. They don't want you to have that kind of relationship. And then ultimately, experience stock drives RepStock, both digitally, much stronger, and non-digitally less so. So how do brands grow through digital experience? Well, first of all, they need to build a positive digital experience. Every new technology is a disruption to every industry, and those that see that as an opportunity are the ones that kind of benefit. For I would say the last 2 decades probably, a lot of brands have seen IT as a cost to minimize. It's something that we offshore call centers to faraway places, or we reduced IT. But if you look at Neil's presentation earlier, a lot of those brands are built on technology. And investment in tech is integral to the brand. It's not a cost to be minimized. It's a playing field that you can swing to your advantage if you're really good at using tech at the heart of the brand. Second thing is digital centricity isn't something that we should clap and applaud people for. It's the norm. If you can't do digital centricity, you can't compete in today's marketplace. And it's crazy still to this day that digital and marketing are often split up in a company, and the central ownership is not joined up. And then the third thing is, whilst obviously you can still drive growth through marketing communications, and that will always be the case, if you have a poor digital experience, that will become a drag factor on your performance. And if you're a media agency or an ad agency who are measured on results, then if you're not responsible for the experience, but the experience is pulling down your results the whole time, then you should be concerned about that. So drive a positive digital experience, more people use the experience, the existing users share that feedback, that generates a growth in reputation, and that ultimately attracts more users. That's what the research tells us is the route to grow in customer experience. And what we think is there are 2 kind of models. There's the established reputation-driven model that tends to be marcoms driven, still delivers volume, but at an increasing cost. It's losing its power as digital behaviors mature. It's generally standard or average products excellently advertised. Again, 50 years, that's been a winning philosophy, often built around customer relationships. And as I said, IT is this cost, this tax on business to be minimized. The emergent model is more experience-led. I remember probably 10 years ago, whenever there was a big new brand campaign, a lot of our clients wanted to redesign the website to fit the new brand advertising. Or even worse still, they wanted to put the brand ad on the website and take prime real estate away to show people the ads, which is kind of crazy now I think back at it. But today, more and more brands are using the experience and featuring that in their advertising. If you take Monzo, I don't know, they're advertising now to grow their business further, but what they're advertising is the product benefits and features that they have. They're not showing a black horse running through a frosted field. What they're doing is showing how strong their product is in comparison. I don't think Starling is doing quite the same with their version. So experience-led, delivering faster growth, potentially at a lower cost, because you don't have this drag factor. Obviously, this is a world where as more things become digital, you're leaning into that kind of trend and helping to normalize behaviors. It allows that tailoring of products and services. And I agree, I think like a lot is talked about personalization, but getting things right ubiquitously for everything is far more important than tailoring things for small segments. And improving the customer brand experience is what these people are targeting on, and they use technology as the centerpiece of the brand. So finally, directly from this research and kind of indirectly as well, I think the first thing is that CX is not going to go away. If you look 5 or 10 years into the future, it's going to become more important than it is today, and more important than it was 10 years ago. But the reality today is CX is not centrally owned by one function within an organization. And whilst it affects marketing massively, marketing people don't necessarily own the CX end to end. If I was to project the next 5 years, I would say it's probably going to be a coalescence of all CX and front office areas back into marketing. I don't think there will be chief experience officers in the future, or chief customer officers, or even chief digital officers. You know, there are no like heads of social anymore. Those things were a moment in time. I think those things are going to go away. And the challenge for the CMO and the office of the CMO is lots of experience is driven by technology. And by background, a lot of CMOs are media and advertising trained, but not necessarily trained in the technologies required to build compelling experiences. And that's a big reimagination opportunity for members of the IPA to think about how we skill up and get more understanding of those areas to better help and serve our clients. The second thing is sometimes CX is bundled in with brand experience or digital experience, and it's dismissed as a lower funnel activity. It's far more important than being a lower funnel activity. You know, it's not digital advertising. Digital advertising is one thing. The experience is something else completely. Requires a different skill set, has much bigger investment than digital advertising will ever have, and to be good at digital experience is not going to come out of the world of digital advertising. And the third thing, obviously, in order to gain that kind of foothold and better reliability in the boardroom, then measuring the impact of experience needs to level up and skill up in itself. And you know, whilst advertising has a storied history of measurement, and every couple of years we see cases from the IPA that really drive our industry's thinking forward, that just isn't the case in CX at the moment. And I think there's an opportunity for everyone in this room to kind of lean into that challenge and think about how we can better create vehicles and measurements and benchmarks to improve our understanding of how the consumer experience not just drives the numbers, but drives the brand and the business impact overall. Thank you.